Welcoming everyone to my HogvilleNET football segment. I'm joined once again by Mike Irwin, the knower of all things Razorback, and for years. He's been really good at this stuff, and this is no exception as we now know who the Arkansas head football coach is. We've known, around approaching 48 hours now, a couple of days into it, and a lot of things already shaking out. But Mike Irwin, KNWA TV, Pig Trail Nation, thank you for joining me on this Tuesday
Sure,
morning.
sure. Glad to be here.
All right, so let's jump right into it. Ryan Silverfield, he's pictured here on the screen, as you can see, and the hire and the announcement was made on Sunday. But some interesting developments when you look at recruiting. Word of his salary and some of the numbers and what his income will be and what that looks like in the first 5 years. It is a 5-year contract. And other things that are top of mind right now, and you and I discussed some of that before we jumped in here, but I just want to go over some of that again with you for all the Hog fans that are tuning in today, so we can share with them some of our thoughts on what this is already looking like and then looking ahead a little bit. But let's start with this. Silverfield, I guess the 35th head coach at Arkansas, but he is set to make, reports out that he is set to make an average of $6.7 million over the next 5 years. Now, the base salary this year, the base salary every year is $350,000. Then other income, which we know is the bulk of it, will get him, I think, to $6.3 million in year one. If he's here in year 5 and nothing changes with the contract, he'll make $6.9 million. So when you add up each season, each campaign where it increases by 100,000, the average is $6.7 million over 5 years. I think it's slightly less than Sam Pittman's final deal. Now, there are performance incentives, bonuses for bowl games. If he gets $1 million bonus, if he wins the national championship, the college football playoffs national championship. But, there's other more modest bonuses depending upon performance. So just in general, what you've heard so far about the contract, is this in line? Obviously, it's lower. I think Sam was one of the lower ones in the SEC. This obviously is going to be in that bottom tier. Does that mean Arkansas is still a bottom tier school with this hire, or is this one of those Arkansas's potentially got a great value here?
I mean, it's hard to say. Fans are pointing out that this would be still one of the lower head coaching salary. It wouldn't be the lowest, but it would be near the bottom. Some people have suggested, well, fine, you got this guy for that, and now it's going to free up more money to get players in here and to get a staff in here. That may be the case. But the numbers are about what I expected. I didn't think they were, I don't think that Golish, if they had hired him, would have probably gotten more, maybe $1 million more. I don't know about Womack. It would have probably been a little less since he's not a sitting head coach. But I think it came down to those three. If we go back to Sunday morning when I went to work, which was about 9 o'clock, I still was in the impression that Golish might be it, but the longer it went and there was no indication from him, I started thinking it was Womack because of his obvious ties to the program. A lot of people were positive toward that. And still, I just think Silverfield, if you go back to Sunday, he was weighed. If you did a poll, and I think somebody did a poll, those things are not scientific because they're done online.
Right.
But he was polling down below the other two. And he was probably near the bottom of any of the people that were considered at one time or another during this job search. And so there was kind of an overwhelming negative reaction when everybody starts finding out about 9 o'clock. Whoa, wait a minute, it's this guy. And I would categorize Sunday as a trash Eurocheck, trash the program, trash the board of trustees. Everybody seemed angry. There was a lot of media pushback. I looked at all that stuff and I'd already prepared for it. And I said to myself, look, regardless of what it is, still my job to look at the facts and tell people what I see. If it's good, if it's bad, I'll say it's bad. If it's okay, I'll say it's okay. If it's good, whatever. I'm just going to, and that's the path that I will follow. If you want to call me a hater, if I say something that's negative, if you want to say I'm sucking up to the athletic department, if I say something good, that's your business. I do not care. I put this stuff out there and people can accept it or not accept it. But By the time I went on to Phil Elson and Matt Jones' radio show that morning at 11:30, it had already become obvious that he had flipped the state's top recruit. He was a four-star, the top recruit for the 2026 class, who had been committed to Oklahoma State. When the coaching change was made over there, he decommitted, but he was just kind of in limbo. Well, as soon as this happened, apparently that was the first thing Silverfield went after. Now, when I'm looking later on at some of the things that are coming from the athletic department, they showed him coming in on a plane. They showed him flying over the stadium and looking out a window and seeing the stadium. They showed him getting off and going over to the stadium and walking around and just looking at the stadium. Then he goes over and he's with Cal. And I thought, well, that's a pretty smart move, because if Cal puts his endorsement on you, that already helps. It turned out that I didn't see in the original video. I've since seen more video that it was Yurachek who took him over there. So that's smart. You can be mad at Yurachek all you want, but if you're trying to sell this guy to the fan base, you want him tied to Cal. So they go over there and they meet, and then Cal at his radio show last night said, and I thought maybe they knew each other. He said, no, he didn't know him, but he called people that he did know at Memphis. They were real high on him, said good things about him. He said he's a grinder. He will push his players. That's what they told him. And then he said, I personally, this is Cal, he said, when I bring people in here that aren't familiar with the athletic program, he said, they can't believe all the facilities we have, how nice they are. They don't understand how we're having all this success in these other sports. We've just got one that we've got to shore up. And he said, I think this guy can do it. And he said, he told him, anything you need from me, I will give it to you. So right off the bat, you made your check by arranging this thing, showed some intelligence. Because if you know people are mad about this hire, you got to change some minds. So that was smart. Okay, then we now know as soon as that was over, he went over, got in his office, and the first thing he started doing was turning these guys around. That was one of the big complaints about Pittman. Now, I think Pittman got a raw deal on this because it's starting to look like he didn't have the money to do some of this stuff. He also had Remy Cofield over there, who was the GM overall, but he was the GM for football. Oh. And he's the one that's sitting there telling these coaches, okay, you want this defensive tackle from Little Rock? And how much is somebody else offering? What is Oklahoma State off? No, look, we can't go above this number. And it sure looks like that what happened was they got shortchanged on a lot of these guys because they were led to believe they didn't have the money. Well, we now know that Ryan Silverfield brought his own football GM with him. Now he's not dealing with Remy Cofield, who's this guy is saying, okay, here's the money you've got. What do we need to offer this guy? He said he got this much from Missouri. Okay, we can match that. And once that started happening, then he started flipping guys. Now, there's still questions. How much money is in there? There's apparently enough money to do what is happening starting tomorrow, which is the early signing period. And that's really become the big signing period for high school players. You can still come and sign in the late period, but most coaches want to clean this thing up pretty much in this early period. So we're going to find out how many he can bring in. And what's really happening here is they had a bunch of decommitments already during this period where you had this interim head coach, Bobby Petrino, and they have now lost 2 or 3 more. But some of the people that follow recruiting, and I haven't seen this from any of the recruiting people that cover football like Otis, but they said it looks like what's happened is these people have contacted him and he has told them, no, we're not going to up what we offered you originally. So they're going to go ahead and leave or do whatever they're doing. It's significant that he has said on a radio show in Northwest Arkansas and a radio show in Little Rock, and I believe this was Sunday, he said, we're not trying to turn this thing around in 3 years. I'm trying to turn this around for this fall. You are going to be surprised at how much difference we can make right off the bat. So he clearly believes not only is he going to make a splash in recruiting, but he said, look, we're not going to win this fall with these guys that I'm getting ready to sign on Wednesday and Thursday. We're not going to win with those guys. That's for the future. He said, we've got to go into the portal. And he's got about a month to figure that out. Now, where's the money coming from? Because I'm told the money for that is not what they need. Okay. The people in Memphis have said he was his own guy in going out and generating money for NIL. He took his GM with him, and they went out and contacted the boosters directly. They didn't use the AD to do this. That's been the complaint about Yurachek. He's not good on good standing with some of these boosters. And I've had people tell me, you will be surprised at what a difference it will make if the head coach himself arranges a meeting and walks in and says, I need your help. I know you're a Hog fan. I know you want this program to be better. I'm going to make it better, but I need your help. And people I've talked to believe he's going to start getting this money, but by the simple product of talking to the people you want money from. One of the complaints I've heard about some of these boosters is you send somebody else in here to ask me for money. You don't do it yourself. The AD. I want you to talk to me. I don't want somebody that you sent in here. Well, if you send the head football coach in there and he's making this plea on behalf of himself, I think that'll make a difference, but we'll have to wait and see. We won't know about that until early January.
Well, there's not very many Frank Broyles, and it's a much different era now. And Frank Broyles was a gifted salesman. He was probably somebody you did want in the room, but you've got to tailor things to what makes sense and what works. And if going back to giving Yurachek credit, I want to hit a couple of things here. One is maybe he realizes what his deficits are, and he needed a coach that has a perception of being able to go in and make his own magic. He's bringing his own GM. The players that you're referring to, the number one player in the state, Danny Bill, a defensive lineman out of Cross County. ESPN ranks him in the top 110 players in the country, a 4-star. You get another defensive lineman in the group that he flipped, Ja'Cory Smith out of Bryant, a football factory down here in Central Arkansas, another D lineman. We know Arkansas, if anything, needs to focus on his defense. If you're going to repair and start winning, not that the freshmen are going to make that difference for you immediately, but the more quality you get at all levels of your recruiting, Mike, it's important to establish a solid foundation, and you've got to address areas of need. So those two names, TJ Hodges, also out of Bryant, a running back, was one of the 4 players yesterday that Silverfield was able to flip. And we know that Arkansas is losing its number one rusher from last season. Question marks about the backfield as well. So obviously that's a position in need. I think anytime you have turnover with your entire staff, you're going to have a lot of question marks at a lot of position groups. But ones you knew about, whether it was the previous staff staying intact or somebody new coming in, or some of these areas that are already being addressed. And then another defensive lineman, Anthony Kennedy, out of Little Rock Central. I misspoke. Ja'Cory Smith is a linebacker, but I knew there were 2 defensive linemen. Anthony Kennedy out of Little Rock Central was the last of the 4 to come off the board and flip to Arkansas yesterday. But just looking about, kind of, following up on some things that you said in terms of the strategicness, the strategery of how this is being rolled out in this announcement. Arkansas did not send and did not have a introduction ceremony right out of the gates. They didn't introduce the new head coach to the public, to the fans, in a traditional way, and what has typically been done. That's actually still a couple of days away, and I want to get your thoughts on that, because you and I talked. You mentioned Sunday morning what time you went into work, around 9 a.m., and you and I talked much earlier than that, or a bit earlier than that anyway, on the phone, and you had information that Arkansas was setting things up. You had a source telling me they're getting ready to set something up for a press conference, but it wouldn't happen until Thursday. And you and I were both in disbelief that you'd have to wait till Thursday to hear about the next hire. And sure enough, it came just a few hours later. But with that knowledge, and now knowing that that's the introduction ceremony, what are your thoughts about why that's taking place at that time, and what that allows Yurachek and Silverfield to do to be ready?
Well, first of all, let me say that there was a big change in the basic reaction on Sunday to Monday. But by that time, people were reacting differently, even people in the media. The whole thing was getting slammed by people in the media some of them really forceful and angry. It's amazing how that changed. And when they realized this guy's in here recruiting. Okay, but one criticism Check still got, and it was as of yesterday. And I don't know if people have figured this out yet, but they were saying, what are you talking about? You're bringing this guy in and he's coming by himself on a plane and there's nobody out there and he's just walking around and there's been no press conference. You're just keeping him cool in his heels. What is this? I'll tell you what it is. I saw Alex Golish's first press conference at Auburn. He hit the ground and they put him on TV and he looked like a deer in headlights. You know why? Because he couldn't answer any questions because he just got there. He couldn't answer questions about the staff yet. A lot of things, because when you're that new into a job, you haven't had time to process a lot of things. Okay, by pushing this back, look at all the things that that Silverfield will now be able to address. We know now that signing day will be behind him, a good part of it. So he'll be able to talk about that. We don't know who his offensive coordinator or his defensive coordinator is going to be. I've heard he's bringing in his entire offensive staff. That may not be right, but he's not bringing his defensive coordinator because he wants a coordinator with SEC type experience. Maybe by Thursday he will have an answer there. So I think it's smart when your check knows there are all these people going to be mad anyway because he's not who they expected. If this guy has a press conference and he can answer all these questions, and most of them appear to be positive answers, then I think he did something very smart by pushing this back. Now, they're going to do this in two ways. There's going to be the regular media press conference. I think it's around 11 o'clock, and it's over in the traditional press conference room in the stadium on the ground floor, but on the north side of the stadium. Then they'll go back around and they'll go into the indoor facility, the indoor workout area, and set up a bunch of folding chairs, just like they did with Sam Pittman. Now, I initially thought, okay, they're trying to control reaction because there's only a limited number of people because I was originally told it was going to be in Bud Walton, and I thought that was a mistake. You let open Bud Walton to anybody that wants to walk in there. There's going to be some people up there in the upper deck mad and yelling and booing and stuff like that. So I thought, well, they're going to control what's going on in the football indoor because it holds fewer people. And I don't remember how many was there for Pittman, but it looked like to me under 1,000, maybe 500-600. But I'm told it's open to anybody that wants to walk through those doors. So that is going to be interesting. And here's why. If you remember, and I said this, in 50 years of covering this program, I've never seen a hire officially protested. And on Sunday morning, they were out there, a bunch of students, maybe 20 of them, in 23-degree weather with their signs. And one of them was interviewed by our people. And he said, well, this is not really against Silverfield because we don't know enough about it. It's about letting the man that caused this problem to develop in the first place, letting him make the hire. That's what they were protesting. So we'll see if there's still any of that happening. I don't know. It is embarrassing if it happens. I think a lot of fans have reacted to some of this and said, come on, let's be polite. We're not jerks. Look, I was reading Summer, I get all these names mixed up. Sumlin's press conference at Florida. And on his own social media page, Florida fans were on there telling him to go home. We don't want you. Get out of here. We don't want you. They thought they were going to get Lane Kiffin. Right. This is a new age we live in where you're rude to people if you don't want them to come in. But this is also internet people. And I want to explain something to you, and I want people to understand this. There is a difference between the kind of reaction you get on the internet. I think Facebook, if you're looking at somebody's own Facebook page, which I do a lot, that's a little bit different because that's people talking to their friends. But when you get a Razorback Nation or a Pig Trail Nation Facebook page, which we have over 100,000 people on that, and that's overwhelmingly negative. I don't even like to go there. I've told people it's like walking through some bad neighborhood at midnight. You don't know what's going to happen. Twitter is a lot like that. And the reaction all along during this coaching search has been, we don't like this guy. We don't like that guy. You're stupid if you like this guy. I like that guy. It's all over the map. And there was no consensus at all. don't assume that that's what the fan base is. And I want to tell a little story about Hogville. And back during the Houston Nut Gus Malzahn thing that was going on in '06, because that was a ground zero for anti-nut. They used to call them the huggers and the haters. And the huggers were the people that wanted Houston Nut, and the haters were the people that wanted him gone.
Right.
But it was overwhelmingly negative on Hogville, on the message board on Hogville about nut. They even published their own poll. It was a Hogville poll. And it said that Houston Nut had 8% support. In other words, 92% of the fans didn't want him. And they were trying to portray that as that's where he stands. And I was a moderator then. And I got in the middle of that and I said, guys, I'm not going to let you create this myth. You people are not the fan base. You're a bunch of people on a message board, but that does not mean you're the fan base. And I said, my wife runs political campaigns. When they do a poll, because when you do a political campaign, you have to know what your opponent looks like, what you look like. You don't want a bunch of garbage. You want it to be real. And they get companies that do scientific polls. And I said, if you did a scientific poll, I promise you Houston Nut would have more than 8% support. Well, there was, and they bashed me. You're an idiot. This is the reflection. This is the real world. There was one guy on there that contacted me. He had money. He said, I got money. He said, I want to do one of these scientific polls. I want to know. I'm tired of not knowing. And he said, what do I need to do? And I said, I'll get in touch with my wife and give you the name of the best polling company in Arkansas. And she gave me the number, the name and the number, and he called him and he commissioned a poll. Spent his own money. I think it was $8,000. I was astounded. You know what the poll showed? Take a guess at the total support in this poll for Houston Nut as opposed to the Hogville poll. 68% as opposed to 8%. Now that is the majority of the fans.
Yeah.
Now Frank made a point that he felt like if any of his coaches, if he wanted to know where they stood, he said, I would feel comfortable with something closer to 75, 80%, but still 68% is well over half the fans support you. So this is what I would caution people. Don't go and look at what's on X about who you want or any reaction to Silverfield or any of this stuff and assume that's the fan base. I promise you, if you did a poll right now, the majority of fans would say, okay, he's our guy. He's coming in here. We'll support him and see what he can do, because that's what they do. Now, you got people say, yeah, and that's how we got in the mess we're in now. You're just trained SEALs. You just accept everything and do whatever you're told, like good little kids. And this is why you keep getting this. And I understand the point they're making. But this is still a state where people generally are not impolite. They're not going to take a guy that took a job. Here's what I would point out about Silverfield. Nobody else wanted this job. They all turned it down. He accepted it. He said, I want to come here. And he did have other offers. And don't think that he doesn't know what he's in for. I want to make another point. People have said this was about Arkansas not offering enough money. I believe they pretty much matched some of these offers that some of these other people got. For instance, I think they were prepared to offer, some of these candidates that were mentioned first. James Franklin, I think they were right there, prepared to offer him what Virginia Tech did. But here's the issue. If you go back to 2014, up to now, that's 14 years, Arkansas's SEC winning percentage is 23%.
Yeah.
In those 14 years, you've got 4 seasons where you didn't have a single win. You've got 2 seasons where you had 1 win. And when coaches look at that, that's not a short-term thing. That's a long-term look at where this program is.
Yeah.
You think Silverfield didn't know that? You think he wasn't aware of the challenge that he's facing? That he's taking over a team that's bottom of the barrel in the league and he's got to turn it around? He knows that. And yet he came here. So there's got to be something there that I think you want to latch on to, a guy that wants to be here. Now, he's still got to produce, and I'm not advocating if he doesn't get the job done, we just have to go, well, let's keep him because he's a nice guy. I'm not saying that. But I am saying I think most fans have an open mind about this situation. They're aware of the fact that he accepted the job. I think they like the fact that he's telling people, when he's on the radio and he's saying this, I'm not just talking about rebuilding this thing in 3 years. I want to do it now. They want to hear that. However, I also want to point out that some people have said, sounds a whole lot like Chad Morris to me when he came in and started saying left lane, hammer down. I would say this to Silverfield. Don't come up with any slogans. Don't do that. Don't do any slogans. Just say we're gonna get the job done and leave it at that.
Yeah.
Because he is making some bold predictions that he's going to have to back up, and we're going to start finding out pretty quickly whether he can do that or not.
Well,
When we find out what his signing class is for high school guys and what it is out of the portal.
yeah, and look, the photo I have on here of Ryan Silverfield and his proud, bold Razorback. I guess that's what is that, a polo net? I can't tell from here.
Right,
I pulled this
that's
off
what it
his
is.
Twitter page. He's already updated his Twitter page. Mike, just at a quick glance, he looks like a young, fired up Barry Switzer, who was a Razorback before he was a god coaching for the Oklahoma Sooners. But just from this vantage point, he looks like a young, fired up Barry Switzer. If you get any results similar to what Switzer did, this is a home run hire. Look, I was one of the ones that was critical. I did a solo show on Sunday, and I said, look, if you're trying to win the hire, the optics of this
Right.
are less.
It's bad.
They're less than other options that maybe weren't realistic for you. Not knowing the money part of it, not knowing other factors, and I acknowledge it. I said if this turns out to be a series of wins for the program, no one's going to remember the optics of the hire. They'll remember the hire as a positive. They won't remember that at the time, or they'll remember it and won't care. But the point is, a fan base has no choice at this point to either resign, give up. I don't know a Razorback fan in my life that's really given up on the Razorbacks because it's all they got. This isn't like other places where there are other teams you can really support. You don't have pro teams. I mean, Razorback, once it's in the blood and in the DNA, it's just not going to happen. And so you're kind of forced to, strap in and stick with the guy. Now, there is a growing number of people that want to see failure to be proven right because it's not
Yes.
their guy, whatever reason. There's going to be that faction, but for the most part, I think this guy's going to be given a chance. I think the positives on Monday, you make the hire Sunday, you don't have the announcement ceremony, the introduction ceremony till Thursday, so you make the hire, you roll into Monday flipping recruits in state. I think there's a special quality, not just about the needs and the quality of the players, because they were all high major talents or power four talents, but the in-state. We talk about how it is in Arkansas. If you can play for the Razorbacks and you're an in-state kid, it's not like other states where they get used to players picking one of three or four in-state high major programs, so they understand that, or they leave for some other place. In Arkansas, they want to keep the homegrown talent home, so there's an extra quality and a win for this coach on Monday. And if some of the other details that might make sense in terms of adding to staff, whatever, emerge by Thursday, it gives him a lot of momentum when he does put his face forward for everybody. When the TV cameras are on and he's speaking to the state, to the fan base, all of that. So there is some you gave Yurachek the nod on being smart about how to do this. There are some advantages here, but you don't want any missteps in the next couple of days either. You definitely want to make sure that it's all positive. When you think defense, Arkansas wasn't perfect on offense, but they were much better on offense than they were on defense for the most part. I think that was obvious. This hire is going to be important, defensive coordinator. What are you hearing, or what do you think is going on in terms of what Silverfield? You might have talked about it a little bit, but what's he bringing with him potentially, and where might he look, especially on the defensive side of the ball?
I haven't heard any names. Again, all I heard was, and this came out of, we interviewed some people at Memphis that covered him, media people that covered him, and they said that's what they're hearing, that he's not going to bring his defensive coordinator. He's going to look for a defensive coordinator with SEC type experience. But has been interesting to watch how some of these fans have changed their reaction. And one of the best, and I think this sums up what I've seen. A guy showed a video of himself in a coffin, and he said, "This was me yesterday. I'm dead. The Razorbacks are dead to me. I'm dead." And he said, "Here I am today." And he got up out of the coffin and got up and started walking. I did see some changes in that respect. So, at least for now, I think people are at least warming up to this a little bit. But by the same token, somebody asked me why should they hire him? And I said, don't ask me because I didn't hire him. I can only tell you what Hunter Yurachek posted on the U of A webpage right after they put it up there. And he put up his 68% winning percentage over the last 6 years. He put up 6 straight bowl appearances.
Yeah.
He put up 2 10-win seasons out of the last 3.
Yeah.
And a top 10 record over the last 3 years, winning percentage. But other people have countered that by saying, yes, but you didn't win or even play for a conference championship in all that time. And that is valid.
That's true.
He apparently has a losing record against teams with a winning record, although it's not as much as some of. I think people post some figures that are inaccurate. But the bottom line is the athletic department didn't put this up, but they could have. His record against those other 3 coaches that got hired for new jobs, I think, was 6-1, something like that.
Yeah.
So he's beaten these guys, that everybody else is champion. It seems to me that when he was in Memphis, they tended to win games like that. Now, he did fall off this year. Somebody made the point, and it is valid. You just hired a guy that's on a 4-game losing streak, and you've got a 10-game losing streak. So what do we have now? Are we going to extend this to 14 games from 10? Well, that's there's remain to be seen if you're going to do that. But there are still some negatives, the things you need to bring out if you want to be objective about all this. So it looks better than I thought it would look. So far, so good. It could go bad tomorrow. Maybe on signing day, he doesn't end up with as many as we thought. We're not sure. He has brought the rankings down for something in the 80s to the more like the 40s, I think, is what I saw. You still, he says he's going to get it to where it's the highest it's ever been. Well, I don't know what the highest it's ever been, but it would have to be somewhere in close to the top 10 to do that. So I don't know if he's going to be able to do that in one fell swoop. But again, this guy's talking a good game, and some people like the fact that they certainly prefer that to him coming in here and saying, well, it's going to take some time, and we have to have patience, and I'm doing the best I can, but we're in a hole, and I want everybody to understand that. He's not taking that approach. He went in front of his players, and they put this up. Hogs Plus put this up. He basically said, I'm going to challenge you like you've never been challenged before. You're going to work the way you've never been worked before. And some of you aren't going to want to do it. Some of you are going to leave rather than do what we're demanding of you. And I'm telling you right now, if you leave here and go to one of our opponent schools, we will beat your ass. That's what he said. That's football coaching talk. Players like that kind of stuff. Some might still leave, but it looks like to me, at least initially, there's been good reaction here.
Now, we're talking about signing day because it's tomorrow. Retention, the portal's going to be huge. We know that. If you're going to turn it around and back up if he's going to be able to back up what he's talking about, you're going to need more than just a strong high school recruiting class and a signing period here. The one good piece of the pie here is if you're having your event on Thursday, the players that sign tomorrow on Wednesday, they'll get that certified through the NCAA clearinghouse. You'll be able to speak specifically about some of these recruiting wins. And so that gives him some more to talk about and some firm ground to stand on. But look, we're talking retention. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, but a guy like KJ Jackson, I want your thoughts. Who are some of the players you would, KJ Jackson to me is the kind of quarterback because he can run and throw. He looks to me to be a leader type and someone that does not, he doesn't look comfortable with failures. He looks like he tries to improve in game and make adjustments. I'm just throwing one name out there because he's a quarterback and he did some good things here at the end of the season. When you look at retention, who are some of the players that come to mind that, man, Arkansas needs to figure out a way to keep them? And what do you think? What are your thoughts on maybe KJ Jackson staying in the program for this coach, or do you even know if this coach would want to move on and do his own thing?
No, I don't know how he feels. There's been no word on whether they've met or not. We do know that Silverfield had one of the best recruiting classes of the entire group of 5. It was pretty highly rated, top 5, top 7, something like that. And one of the guys he's bringing into Memphis is an outstanding quarterback with phenomenal passing numbers. Now, there's speculation, would he bring him here? Nobody knows. That hasn't been stated yet, but he might want to bring somebody that he'd already recruited there and bring him over here.
Yeah.
If you could convince Quincy Rhodes not to go to the NFL, which he probably will go, but he might not. If you convince him to stay, that's fine. There are several offensive linemen that got experience this year that are younger and could help you if you can retain them. There was some feeling that Mateos might be retained just for that reason. But if you say,
Yeah.
and some people think it's he's bringing the entire offensive staff, then that would be out. So I don't know what's going to happen on that. But there are some linemen, especially on this team right now, that they need to keep. Shaq McCoy is one of them. He's a young guy and he played some this year, but I mean, he was considered he's a 5-star that transferred in here. So if you get him to come back here and he's your right tackle or whatever, that looks a lot better than if you don't have him. So I don't know yet what's going to happen, but he may have some answers on some of this stuff again by Thursday. And if not, if they're smart, they will continue to put him in front of the people. I don't know anything about his availability issues. This is so important and people do not understand it. When you close a program off to the media, it's not that you're making us mad. What you're telling us is you're not interested in getting information out to the public. How are you going to do it if you don't open it up? That's why I've always believed the spring should be totally open. I don't understand why you keep any secrets in the spring, except that Sam Pittman always said because we don't want other coaches looking at what we've got and then trying to get us, steal them out of the portal. Well, that's over. You don't have a portal period after spring anymore. So you don't have to worry about that. So to me, he should open everything up. Let people see who he's got. What kind of offense are they running? What does their defense look like? And talk every day and have players talk about how it's going. These are ways that you can at least have an impact on fans. And the same thing in August. Now, Pittman pretty much had a policy that once the season started, you're not coming to our practice. And I can understand that. You're doing things every week that are a little bit different for each opponent. But all the way up through camp, and into those 2 weeks before in the preseason preparations, to me, you ought to be pretty much open if you're trying to convince fans that you're making moves to improve the program and it's going pretty good. It's still PR. I still would caution people, no matter what they do, even if he opens it up and is very does everything he can to inform people. It still doesn't matter in the end. What matters in the end is when you start playing games. But they're not playing games right now. They're not playing football right now. He said, I wish I could. I wish there was a game this week. Then we could just get right at it. But he's going to have this, 8.5 month period or however long it is to go through and do all of the stuff that he needs to do to get this team ready to play in the fall. But also keep the fan base informed and keep the boosters happy and the fans happy. And that's not an easy thing to do when you just went through a season in which you didn't win a single conference game.
Yeah. The interesting thing is you talked about the last 14 years, the 4 seasons of not winning a league game, a couple more, we only won one. There is something interesting about this 2-win team that lost its last 10 games. There's an argument to make they were a few plays away from, winning most, if not all of those. But what your record says you are. Having said that, though, does it give you the impression that Arkansas was so close that there is a sense of we need to retain some of these guys? Maybe there's just a few little tweaks that changes the DNA from a losing DNA to a winning DNA. But you're right. You've got several months of winning other things than on the field. PR, marketing your program, figuring out a way to increase NIL, figuring out a way to motivate whoever needs to be motivated to get behind this. And then money talks and everything else takes the bus at the end of the day in this NIL revenue sharing era. What has got to change? I mean, how does Arkansas get back to being at worst? The floor is a middle of the SEC program, and the ceiling is, competing for the upper tier and a chance to be in the college football playoffs. I don't know that you can have Arkansas ready for that in a year's time, even if you're, gung ho as apparently Silverfield is publicly what he said so far. What is it really going to take to realistically be there in 2 or 3 years, Mike?
Well, again, you started. I like what you said before about that. You're pretty much saying this team shouldn't have been a 2-win team. There were some games they should have won. He didn't come right out and refer to the mistakes that were made and the things they did to lose those games. But I think when he said, you're going to work like you've never worked before, we're going to push you like you've never been pushed before. What he's saying is, you are an undisciplined football team. You had talent. You were undisciplined. And we're going to bring back the discipline. We're going to eliminate the mistakes. And then you're going to be surprised at how much better we are, because we are not bottom in the barrel in talent. We're bottom in the barrel in effort. You know, we kept finding ways to beat ourselves. And every time that happened, guess what our opponent did? They found a way to win.
Yeah.
So we've got to be what that is. And that, if you can get that mindset instilled in these players, then you can turn this thing around quicker than maybe some people think you can.
It's possible. You know, it's interesting. We mentioned the discipline part of it. I don't see any other way you can look at just the consistently high level of penalties. Arkansas ranked among the bottom of college football, not just this year, but every year in the last several years, and just in penalties. You look at the turnovers the last couple of years. You look at the crucial moments in games where you had a chunk lost yardage play that took you out of field goal range. Just the little nuances, how you use timeouts or weren't ready coming out of a timeout. All these things does go to the details of minutia and the discipline part. And maybe it's just a matter of having a coach that can identify exactly what's needed. If your culture begins from day one, that we eliminate that kind of stuff and we hold you accountable, that's a win out of the gates as well, Mike. And I don't see how it can go anywhere but up in terms of those aspects of what we saw play out the last few years.
Well, again, if he can do that, if they come in there and they're demanding and he means what he says, and this all starts. People ask me what went wrong this year, and I say, you know what went wrong? I wasn't there, but didn't have to be there. It started in the winter conditioning program. This is where character is built. This is where leaders are built. When you're in there, and it's mostly done indoors, so you're not even outside because it's too cold. So you're in that indoor workout area. You got all these stations that you have to go through, this drill and that drill and this drill, and it's just grunt work. It's just it's conditioning. It's precision on moving and different things. There are different drills that you would have to do in the fall for agility and different things like that. But it's almost like a bunch of busy work, but you've got to do it right. And you've got coaches standing there yelling at you. Now, it's not the staff because they're not there. It's the conditioning staff.
Yeah.
And so for the first month and a half, 2 months, these guys are like your parents. And they have to be demanding. And you have to understand from them, and then they've got to go back and report to the coaching staff, look, this guy right here, you better start talking to him because he's not doing what he's supposed to. And then the leaders get developed there. If they're smart, they pick out 3, 4, 5 guys and they tell them, they bring them in and say, look, this isn't going the way we want. We want you're out there. We want you telling your teammates this is not acceptable. We can't win if you do this and you do that. We need better from you. John McDonald always told me that he didn't win those national championships himself. He said, I had a group of upperclassmen every time I had a team, every year. I identified 5 or 6 guys that were my leaders. They were in the locker room when I wasn't. They were around these players away from track when I wasn't. And they were my eyes and ears, and I trusted them. And when they came to me and said, I know you signed this half miler, and he's a freshman, and he's really good coming out of high school. But guess what? He's got a bad attitude. And he said, that's all it took. I would call the guy in and say, I'm going to arrange for you to transfer. And he said a lot of times it was easy to find a place for him to go because he was highly ranked, but he wasn't what we wanted. And he said, I showed faith in them, and they responded. And this is what you got to do. The 2021 team that Sam Pittman had, they had leaders on that team. They did stories every week. We were interviewing these guys, and there were stories from their teammates of things they had done during practices, especially in the summer and especially in August camp. And there was a reason why that team was different from the others, because there was more accountability. And that's what he's got to bring back. And it sounds like he understands that, but we're still going to have to see if it happens. And I hope when it's going on that they've got enough sense to show that to the public. Don't just let us hear rumors about it. If you got 3 or 4 guys that are developing themselves into team leaders in the winter conditioning program over the next couple of months, put them on TV. Bring them out there. Don't just do the Hogs Plus thing. Let everybody else interview them too. Let the media interview them. The internet people, the TV guys. Put them out there and show some of that video. They put some of that video up on the internet. We're always stealing it and using it, because we can't shoot it ourselves, which that's good. We're perfectly fine to do that. But there are stories to be told, even in the off-season winter program. You just have to make use of it.
I think through this whole thing, we're going to wrap up here in a minute. I think one of the things that you touched on that really stands out to me, and we're going to find out at the end of the day, if this guy is able to generate excitement in the program with his salesmanship, and I'm talking about NIL, revenue shares obviously going to be there, but whatever he can do to help bolster his recruiting. At the end of the day, Arkansas needs to compete in recruiting across the field as much across the board as it does on the field. And I think there's been a part of that, obviously, that's been lacking since Arkansas's been in the SEC when NIL wasn't legal, and now that it is. To me, that might matter as much, if not more than anything. But the leadership stuff, I think, is important. He's got to identify the players that can be his assistant coaches and his leaders and let it trickle down. And maybe that's also a strength that he brings to the table, understanding what it's going to take, that he can't be the only voice. He's going to have voices in the locker room, players, peers that help him in that endeavor. What are we leaving out, Mike, before we sign off? Anything we should be adding or talking about here as we wrap this up?
Well, there is a change this year in the way these scholarships are allotted. They're eliminating walk-ons, so you're going above the 85 limit and going to 105. Some people have suggested that every one of those scholarships from 85 up to 105, those all should be filled with players from Arkansas. They might not ever get on the field. Some of them will. You don't know. You never know. There's a transition from high school to college, even college to the NFL, and I think it happens with coaches too. Some people accelerate or do better, when they go from high school to college, and some don't. Some guys in college don't make it in the NFL. Average college players become really good NFL players. So you don't know how this is going to come across. But if you bring in those players and they're no longer walk-ons, they're going to be on scholarship. So this is going to mean something to them. They can explain to the out-of-state kids what Silverfield has already talked about. I just saw a thing he just put out. Now, whoever's doing this for him, use the forward-facing hog. I would make a suggestion. Hey, coach, no, don't put up something with the forward-facing hog. Fans hate that thing. But he put up the big hog there, and then he made a reference to this football team does not belong to the University of Arkansas. It belongs to the state of Arkansas. That tells me again, he's got this figured out. You got to make this a statewide program. Better to do that than to make every one of those guys that used to be walk-ons and are now on scholarship from 85 to 105, make those kids from Arkansas. They will be leaders for you.
Great way to wrap this up. I think those are great points you made. Always great having you on, Mike, because your depth of knowledge and the way that you dive into the scenarios and what's playing out, and you have good reasoning on your opinion. So I respect that. I appreciate it. I'm glad I was able to learn from you once again today. I look forward to the next time you're on. I want to thank everybody for joining in here. HogvilleNet Football, our segment today, as Ryan Silverfield now, getting into the first 48 hours of his job, already some things moving, shaking, and breaking. The introductory ceremony, another 48 hours away. So the first week is always, you start learning more than you ever knew about the new guy that you just hired, and then things really start to shape up. And I think we covered quite a bit today, Mike, in terms of what we think already, and then what to kind of, what we're paying attention to moving forward. But for all you Hog fans, we appreciate you. Thanks for being here. Be great in all your endeavors today. We'll see you soon.